Greetings, detectives. It's Mrs. McKay, and we are working on Case 4, Learning Target, Clue 1. And we're going to start by just looking at a little bit of vocabulary. So let's look over here where it says vocabulary. There are a couple things that you're going to need to know. Domain and range. That has to do with a function. The domain are all of your x values, and the range is all of your y values. So the domain is what you put in, it's your input. The range is your output, what comes out. And that's going to be important in understanding discrete and continuous, which are our next two words, which is what we're really going to talk about, discrete and continuous. Discrete, just very quickly, means individual, separate. Continuous means connected, okay? Arithmetic and geometric sequences are things that we talked about last time. An arithmetic sequence has a constant difference, meaning that you add or subtract the same thing. You add the same thing to each term to get the next term. And geometric is just like that, except that instead of having a constant difference, you have a constant ratio, which means you multiply by something. So that's just a real quick review of our vocabulary. Let's go ahead and move on to our learning target clue and fill this in. I can determine, so write the word determine, if a function is continuous or discrete. Now, when we worked on sequences, we actually worked on discrete functions, because when you got a sequence, a geometric sequence, you had a certain number of terms, and you had a certain number, and you had each term had an answer so let's say we had term 1, there was an answer. Term 2, there was an answer, right? There was an actual number there. And we didn't have in-between terms. We didn't have term 1 and then term 1.5. We just had term 1, term 2, term 3, term 4, okay? So sequences are discrete functions, but we're going to move on beyond that. So when you think about a function, you think about many different types of equations. Well, discrete functions are typically, that's what an arithmetic or a geometric sequence is it's discrete, okay? So let's look very carefully at the difference between discrete and continuous. The definition of a continuous function or continuous data is a set of data is said to be continuous if the values belonging to the set can take on any value within a finite or infinite interval. So that means it can be, the value can be anything. So you have a domain, and then your range can be anything. Okay, it could be any number in between. It doesn't have to be just a whole number like 4 or 63 or -2. It can be any number. And a discrete function says a set of data is said to be discrete if the values belonging to the set are distinct and separate or unconnected values. So that'll make more sense as we go on. So a key for continuous data, the important thing to remember is that continuous data usually requires a measuring device like a ruler or a stopwatch or thermometer or speedometer. So we're measuring something, and we can have lots of in-between amounts. Discrete data is counted. The description of the task is usually preceded by the words number of. So it's not that, so we're going to count the number of cities in a state. That's a very specific number, okay? It's not like there's 3.5 cities, there's 3 cities or 27 cities or whatever. So, so discrete data can be counted, and it's not continuous, okay? Now, let's talk about domain. The domain for a continuous function is the set of input values consisting of all numbers in an interval. So every single possible number there could be in that interval, okay? And then in discrete, it's consisting of only certain numbers in an interval. So that means that when you're going to graph it, so let's look at an example of a graph. If we were going to graph it, continuous is connected. Every single point on that line is a part of the solution, okay? But in discrete, they are not connected. So you might have a point here and a point here, point here, point here, but they are not connected. Each one of these is its own solution, but whatever's in between it is not a solution. So in connected points or in continuous, your domain is real numbers, every single possible real number. In this one, your domain, meaning your x values, are just the integers. We're not getting any fractional components in there, okay? So that's a real quick look at continuous and discrete. And if it's just kind of seeming awfully mathy and doesn't make a lot of sense, I have it written for you over in plain English. A continuous function allows the x values to be any points in the interval, including fractions, decimals, and irrational values. And a discrete function allows the x values to only be certain points in the interval. Usually it's only integers or whole numbers, okay? So usually that's sort of the difference between continuous and discrete. Continuous is connected, discrete is separate, all right? So here's a few examples. Let's see if we can do these. The number of people in your class, would that be considered discrete or continuous? What do you think? You're right, it's discrete. And let's take a look at the next one. The hair on your head grows 1/2 inch per month. Would that be considered discrete or continuous? That's right, it's continuous because it's not that it's grows for 1/2 month, boom, it's 1/2 month, it's boom, it's grown 1/2 inch, and then it stops growing. It's a continuous growth, right? Your hair is continually growing. So we could check at any point during the month and see how far your hair has grown. Look at the next one. Approximately 3.24 billion gallons of water flow over Niagara Falls. Is that discrete or continuous? You're right, it's continuous. Because it's not that a whole bunch flows at one time. It's not like a faucet that turns on and off. It's constantly flowing, and if you measured it at any point during the day, you would be able to know how many gallons have flown over it. And the last one, the average person laughs 15 times per day. Is that discrete or continuous? And hopefully on this one, you said it's discrete, because people usually don't laugh half an amount, right? They laugh, it counts as one laugh. Doesn't matter how short or long it is, that's a laugh. And so it's very discrete. It's 15 times per day, okay? And that's discrete and continuous. A quick and short little lecture on that. Make sure that you write down the key ideas for you that will help you to remember what's the difference between discrete and continuous. Just write it down in your own words so that you can look at it quickly and know exactly what it means. And that's it. I'll see you in class.